This arraignment happened just shortly after noon. We understand that he went into the courtroom. That's Daniel Penny, the 24-year-old former Marine. He was wearing handcuffs when he went in. I believe we have some video of him coming out when he did not have his hands were not cuffed. We understand that bail has been set at $100,000, that Penny himself put up $6,000, and his parents guaranteed the entire bond.
So, of course, that is Daniel Penny, the man who put Jordan Neely in a fatal headlock just last week, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter, has already turned himself in, and now the legal process, of course, has begun. But before we get into evaluating the charges, what we think about that, for those of you who might not have been following the story as it developed over the past week, here is what happened. So shortly after 2 p.m. back on the 1st of May, Jordan Neely walked into the F train at the 2nd Avenue station in New York City and began reportedly shouting that he was hungry and thirsty. According to journalist Juan Alberto Vasquez, who was present, Neely yelled, "I don't have food, I don't have a drink, I'm fed up, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison, I'm ready to die." Vasquez said Neely then, quote, removed his jacket and whipped it to the floor of the train. Neely started shouting and much of the passengers on that subway car cleared out. That is when Daniel Penny apparently pinned Neely to the ground, placed him in a chokehold while 2 other passengers were restraining him. So 3 people were restraining him. Penny was the one with the chokehold. And according to witnesses, Neely had not physically attacked anyone. The person who initiated the physical altercation was Daniel Penny. And as a result of it, of course, Jordan Neely died. That was ruled to be a homicide, and it wasn't until this week that we moved forward on actual charges. Now, in response to this coming out, Alvin Bragg has released a statement saying, after an evaluation of the available facts and evidence, the Manhattan DA's office determined there was probable cause to arrest Daniel Penny and arraign him on felony charges. Jordan Neely should still be alive today, and my thoughts continue to be with his family and loved ones as they mourn his loss during this extremely painful time. The announcement was also met with a statement from New York Mayor Eric Adams, who said last night, "I appreciate DA Bragg conducting a thorough investigation into the death of Jordan Neely. I have the utmost faith in the judicial process, and now justice can move forward against Daniel Penny." Notably, in the early days following the death, Eric Adams had been circumspect, I guess would be the word for his commentary on this, was keeping his cards very close to his chest, but now being more outspoken. We're gonna have statements from the lawyers from both sides, but what do you all think about the fact that there are charges?
Yeah, I actually think that these charges are just right, and I'm gonna explain why in a minute, but I'm curious what Waz thinks, and I wanna go to him first.
I mean, obviously, you guys know this story is a bit near and dear to my heart as a New York City native. I've been on the subway since I can literally remember, been riding the trains. And everybody who's still over there, I now live in Los Angeles, but when I speak to people from home, they feel like the train has become a way more contentious sort of area of New York City life, right? There's just more homeless people on there, more people suffering through mental health crises, and it's created a sort of atmosphere of, I don't want to say panic, but definitely a lot of fear. And I think that atmosphere is what births a situation where a guy, not a freaking cop, not an authority figure, thinks it's his duty somehow to restrain this person, Jordan Neely, and ultimately kill him. It's tragic. I'm happy the cops ultimately found it within themselves to be like, this guy committed a crime against this homeless man, and they arrested him. However, I will say this, because I think it's important. A lot of this is turned into the typical right, left, nonsense, BS, culture war. This guy was lynched, yada, yada, yada. I just happen to not believe that. I don't think people find white or Asian or Latino homeless people to be cute and cuddly. I don't think they feel less menaced by homeless people who are of different races. And I say that about people who happen to not be white. I think there's a framing of this that the people on the subway who might be afraid of homeless people, or this guy who created, who behaved quite recklessly and ended this man's life, are a bunch of Karens. That's not true. It's poor and working normal people using the subway in New York City every single day, and the conditions that happen to be the case now are the results of policy by the state. Okay, it's not individuals not being sufficiently compassionate enough towards homeless people. This is Eric Adams. This is the state of New York's policy. This is a problem that they've created, and the most vulnerable people in our society who cannot fend for themselves out on the streets. They cannot take care of themselves. It's up to the state. These are the people this is the entity with the resources to fix this. It's up to the state to remedy this situation with housing and care, right? And the problems that these people face aren't just one size fits all. Some people are suffering from drug addiction. Other people have mental health issues. Other people have both. Like, this isn't some simple, this black guy got lynched on the subway. No, there's like a greater system at play that produced this outcome. And I would hope that especially people on the left like us could concentrate and focus their energies on the people who actually F this up. Okay?
Yeah.
It's the powers that be.
So let me pick up on that. So the reason I think that it's the right charge is because, look, if Neely had attacked someone on that subway station, then Penny, whether we like it or not, would have had an excellent self-defense case. Would it have been disproportionate? Even if he got attacked, it would have been disproportionate, but it would have been very hard to prove, okay? But I saw some anchor on TV today say this concept of preemptive self-defense. Now, to be fair to Penny's team, it's not, his lawyers aren't saying that, but there is no such thing as preemptive self-defense. It's not a thing that exists, okay? So when you go, Neely, the homeless guy in this case, had not attacked anyone. Now, don't get me wrong, when he says, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison, I'm ready to die. If you're not concerned, you're actually wrong. You should be concerned, and you should get off that subway if you can. And I get the concern. And if there's anybody on the left saying, "Oh no, you're just being a Karen by being concerned," no, you're an idiot. Get out of that subway train because that's a dangerous dude. Okay, and so and we know now in hindsight we know that he was dangerous. So this whole he's just a lovable Michael Jackson impersonator. No, guys, he had deep issues. Okay. That doesn't mean that he should have been killed. That doesn't mean he's a bad guy. He had mental health issues, right? I'm gonna get to what should have happened earlier in a second, right? But it doesn't help anyone's cause if you pretend like he was just a lovable teddy bear that walked in on that day and this guy jumped him and killed him because he was black or homeless or whatever the category is, right? Now, does that mean that Penny had a right to kill him? Absolutely not, absolutely not. He did not take any physical step towards accosting anyone. And guys, if you jumped and choked every homeless person in New York that was screaming loudly in a subway or menacing or threatening, let's keep it real. There's a lot of those folks. You'd be choking a lot of people. Do not do that. Do not do that. It is not self-defense. And I think in this case, it's going to be difficult to prove that Penny had the intent to go murder him. Like, I looking for a guy, there he is. And by the way, it's not impossible to prove because look, to me, there's a giant chunk we don't know yet. So we know we saw the choking, but we never saw the beginning of the video. But we have witnesses, and by the way, Penny's own lawyer says that he was aggressively threatening people. In other words, he did not attack anyone, he did not hit anyone. So that part is clear. The part that's not clear is, did Penny jump him from behind? Was there any alternative? Was there why did he do this? Like, for example, was he looking for trouble? Like, to me, I call it the Rittenhouse standard. Rittenhouse went and looked for trouble. He's like, I've got a weapon. I'm gonna go into the middle of what I view to be a riot. And if anybody throws a plastic bag at me, or there's a shot nearby, or there's a skateboarder that's, etc., I got it. I know that Rittenhouse was probably very scared at that moment, right? But he didn't need to go and try to look for that trouble. So if it turns out Penny wanted that trouble, went and looked for that trouble, and then jumped the guy from behind, I'd say these charges are not enough, right? But if it turns out, as witnesses are describing now, Penny jumps the guy before he'd done any attack, the second-degree manslaughter sounds about right, okay? So now, and by the way, that way you can get a conviction. If you overcharge, you won't get anything, right? So I know for a lot of folks, no, you have to go extreme on every single thing, but we're not in that camp. Look, one more thing about what Waz is saying. So when you go to help this guy, and he had a lot of violent episodes. He punched a 67-year-old woman in the face and broke her face, broke her nose, her orbital bone, etc. He punched and assaulted a Mexican guy who was a migrant, who lives in Harlem, to Waz's point about just a working poor guy. And the guy's like, whoa, this guy's dangerous, etc. There's no question he was dangerous. There is a question as to whether he was dangerous at that moment. That is a critical question in this case. But guys, so what do we do with that? Well, he'd already been arrested. They already did a diversion program. He should have been arrested. I like that there's a diversion program. That's good. Where the system failed was that institutionalizing him was voluntary, but he's not in shape to make that rational decision on whether he should be or shouldn't be institutionalized. I think it should have been involuntary. And by the way, if you say, oh, that takes his freedom away, you guys aren't getting it. This isn't about freedom, and I'm not interested in your libertarian right-wing point of view. No, it's about making sure that you protect not only everyone else, but Neely too. So what did he do? He walked out of that diversion program on day 13, and then this happened, right? If he couldn't walk out, not only would other people be safer, but he'd be alive. He'd be alive. You're not doing him any favors by sending him back out in the street when he's punching random people in the face. None of that justifies his death. None of it does. If Penny jumped him like it looks, he should be found guilty, okay? But the overall issue is much more important, as Waz said.
Yeah, and you sort of sketched out some hypotheticals that could theoretically, at least in my I'm not a lawyer, my non-expert opinion, could lead to, I think, stronger charges. But it's weird that I feel the need, I don't know if you guys feel the need, to remind people that you do not only suffer legal consequences for killing someone when you intentionally murder them, you could accidentally kill people and you will suffer consequences as a result of that. And you can do stuff that's way less obviously risky than literally using a chokehold. We should not need in 2023 to point out to people that what a chokehold is it's choking someone, and especially in New York City, that can result in a person dying. It is super risky to do that, to hold it for a very long time, especially when multiple of the people are holding them down. If two people are like pushing each other and you pull one away and he trips and hits his head and bleeds out, you could suffer consequences for that. That's way less sustained risk than holding someone down and keeping a chokehold going. And for some reason, like I'm glad that Waz brought up the sort of the needless left and right, back and right. I mean, look, there is a very sustained campaign right now in response to these charges on the right that this guy is obviously a massive hero. There should be nothing. They're not like angry because the jury has now come in and he's spending 15 years in prison. And by the way, he could spend 5 to 15 years in prison. They're simply angry that there is going to be a legal process at all. They don't want there to be. They don't want him to be booked. They don't want there to be charges. They want him to talk for 2 minutes to a cop and then go on about his day. The same people, by the way, that in everything else in their politics, they would say that they're for personal accountability and responsibility. You're responsible for what you do. Even if we assume, as you are, that he wasn't going and looking for trouble, he wasn't trying to murder someone, he doesn't have an online history of like rabid racism or anger at the unhoused, or let's say he doesn't have any of that. When you jump in that way, it's not like you get everything that happens from that free because you had good motivations or whatever, and that's even assuming that you did. That's simply not how the world exists, and it's super weird to have to point that out to full-grown adults.
I'm gonna say a couple more things about that, because I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that he didn't want to kill him. I don't know. There's no evidence to that effect that anyone has said yet, right? So when some people on the left says, "Oh, I know he wanted to," like Waz said, "I know he wanted to," and he was saying that you shouldn't be saying this. He wanted to lynch him. He wanted to do this. How do you know? By the way, we might be able to prove that later, because now he's raising money on like these like Christian sites I don't mean like Christian as in like, hey, want to go to church on Sunday? But as in super right wing, the same people who raised money for Rittenhouse, etc. So John is right. These are instant fandom. Hey, you murder someone that you probably shouldn't have killed and they're in the wrong category, the right wing is gonna celebrate you.
Which really fast, even that doesn't necessarily mean that he's this bad guy. He might be desperate and need the money, and that's the only place to get it. We don't know.
Exactly. What we're asking for is something super basic, but we're not getting it from any political camp, which is for the left, you don't know his intent yet. It might be terrible, in which case I'm gonna get 10,000 times angrier, right? Because intent matters. It matters in the law and it matters in judging a situation, right? For the right to assume that he was doing self-defense when none of the evidence indicates that, come on, like, I don't know. I don't know if they care at all about the facts, but the facts matter. And again, I think this is the right charge. It probably, based on what we know so far and the prosecutors know more, it seems like they got the right balancing act. Waz, I want to give you one more opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't really give a damn what the right has to say about this. They're gonna be hysterical and ridiculous no matter what. I think objectively we can say, had the white boy not intervened, most likely 99% of the chance nobody would have died. Somebody only died but for this guy's intervention. I don't think anybody can make the credible, a credible assessment that Neely was about to kill somebody. So that to me that's useless with engaging. But what I will say to people on the left, for folks to understand, what Eric Adams is going to do in New York City specifically, he has already broadened the scope by which you can detain these folks. And what's ultimately going to happen, because we have no infrastructure of care work to give these people care. We have no infrastructure to house folks in New York City. And so what ultimately is going to happen is they are just going to mass incarcerate people who don't have homes. That's going to be what the result of this is. And that's horrible. That is terrible. That is not the answer of how we deal with this stuff. Because again, these are the most vulnerable people in the society. And so, yeah, if people want to concentrate on some alleged race war or some, whatever, I don't even know, culture war kind of thing, I think they're missing the point. A lot of people are frustrated with the situation of what's happening with the unhoused, people suffering from drug addiction and mental health breakdowns. And a lot of these people, again, are not some bougie, bourgeois, hoity-toity New York City elite. And I'll get off of this by telling people this. Back in the days, the sort of myth that people would tell each other in New York is that the subway, everybody rides it, from the migrant worker to the Wall Street bro and everybody in between. And it's just this whole melting pot. That is nonsense in 2023. There are no rich people taking the train every single day. The people who are on the train and who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, who might suffer an attack from somebody having a mental health breakdown, are poor and working people by a mile. There might be a sliver of people, yes, exceptions of people who take the train. This isn't some Karen issue. I need to stress that to people. These are normal people who depend on this mode of transportation to get themselves to and from work and wherever else. And they're the ones dealing with this.
Yeah, I just gotta double down on everything that Waz is saying. Like, there are very few elites left taking the subway in New York. There are no elites taking the bus in LA or Denver or Washington, okay? So these are definitely working class folks who are suffering because of the wrong system that we have. And I'll double down on something John said too, which is the chokehold. That's a sleeper hold. You cannot hold that for longer than 30 seconds. You're gonna endanger the guy's life. Hold it for 15 minutes and you're a Marine? Nah, that's crazy, okay? So be real on that too. And the last thing is, look guys, mass incarceration is not the answer either. We criticized some people who are jumping the gun on the left, the right, but I'm also gonna criticize the middle here, the moderate, and I consider Mayor Adams to be a moderate in New York. And okay, you wanna institutionalize people, but if you don't offer them actual services, healthcare, to actually make them better, you just stuff them in one place, that isn't gonna help at all. Then they're gonna tear each other apart. And that doesn't help them, that doesn't help the community, etc. Can we please do something that is smart and reasonable? Spend the money towards helping these folks, but demand that they actually get the help and use the help, okay? And that's not a mean thing to do, okay? That's actually something that actually helps them. You're not helping their freedom if you let someone who's having a mental breakdown out in the street. It's going to cause him much greater harm. He's in much greater danger if you don't help him. But stuffing him into a dark corner is not the answer. So for God's sake, give the money in a proportional way that is reasonable. By the way, that I bet you the overwhelming majority of citizens of New York would agree with. So instead, we put all of the money into the police budget and then do these half measures that wind up being a total disaster for everyone involved.